Good morning, everybody. We'll call to order our special meeting of the Mason County Board of County Commissioners for Monday, December 4th, 2017. I'll begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. Wes, if you'd please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if the clerk would please take roll.
Commissioner District 1, Randy Netherland.
I'm here.
Commissioner District 2, Kevin Schutte.
Here.
Commissioner District 3, Terry Jeffries.
Here.
Very good.
Excuse me, Terry Drexler. I was old.
She's here too.
Very good. Thank you. It moves us to item number 4, which is our 2018 budget hearing. And at this time, I would ask Frank Pinter to come forward and brief.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a public hearing to consider the adoption of the 2018 budget for Mason County. RCW 36.40.060 requires the Board of County Commissioners to hold a public hearing on the 2018 preliminary budget to allow taxpayers to appear and to be heard for or against any part of the budget. The public hearing also allows county departments to publicly testify if they so desire. Pursuant to RCW 36.40.071 and Resolution 111-85, this hearing is to be held on the first Monday in December. Copies of the 2018 preliminary budget were made available to the public on November 20th, 1927. A balanced budget must be adopted by December 31st. The recommendations or motions for consideration today after the public component of the hearing is to move to close the public hearing and consider adoption of the 2018 budget on December 19th, 2017 at 9:30 a.m. Option 2 is to move to continue the public hearing to Tuesday, December 5th at 9:30 a.m. And option 3 is to move to adopt the 2018 budget in the total amount of $390,606. The current expense is $36,966,203, and the other funds are $59,242,403.
Okay, very good. Any questions for staff at this time? Okay, hearing no questions for
Thank you.
staff, I will go ahead and open the public comment period. If you would like to make comment on the budget, you can please come forward to the podium and the chair will recognize you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Judge Victoria Meadows, Mason County District Court. Again, we would urge the commissioners to review and add back in the funds that we need to run district court effectively and within the law. If there's any reduction in our force in district court, we will not be able to adequately serve the needs of the public. We will be in a position where we have to do priorities. Priorities are criminal law cases and protection orders. The upshot is the infractions may be set on the back burner. People requesting hearings won't get them. What does that result in? Dismissals. What does that result in? Less revenue. And if you're going to adjust it downward, we're going to have to adjust our revenue downward. That has not been focused on. I have no idea how we would predict that. At this point, I would urge the commissioners to add back into the budget the additional funds, and I believe it's $88,000 that have been removed from this, so that we can fully, well, it's not fully, because as I've told you before, we need a couple more clerks and a part-time commissioner, but so that we can adequately represent the community and carry out justice in Mason County. There's also a risk of public safety issues. How are we going to hold our review hearings? How am I going to have sufficient staff to check on those reviews? The probation department does review those individuals who are on probation for assaults and violations, no contact orders, repeat DUI offenders, but we have over 1,000 more people that the clerks monitor for review. If I don't have enough clerks, they don't get reviewed. So public safety issues do come into play here. It's not just about loss of revenue and loss of infractions, but public safety, and I'd ask that the commissioners consider that and add back in to the expenditure line the approximately $788,000, I don't have it memorized, that we need to be fully staffed to marginally run, to get the job done. We will continue, as I've indicated before, we'll back off our request for the additional people, recognizing once again the county's limited resources, but we need our current staff. I cannot function as a court and do justice without full staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Brenda Hershey, and I live in the Camilche precinct. My address is Post Office Box 1936. We've not had bank capacity and some of the things that you're doing to balance the budget this year. We've not had in the past, and I would just ask that the public have an explanation of what the impact of this is and what this means. I went out on the website and looked for those resolutions that you discussed at the public hearing on last Tuesday, and I can't find them online. Perhaps that's because, I don't know. Usually we will see something when you've acted on it. We'll see it be posted online. But I think we need to have an explanation of what this means, and particularly on the bank capacity. Do you have to raise the entire amount of the bank capacity on roads for 2018? Could it be done, to some lesser degree? Is all of that needed in the road fund? And the reason I bring this up is that within my portion of Mason County, I'm looking at property tax increase of a considerable amount as we pay the increase for the Shelton School District that we're going to be paying for 2 bonds. We're going to be paying extra to the state for school property tax, and it just goes on and on. So I would just ask that first that we have this explained, more clearly, so that we as property taxpayers understand it, but then also that you would consider, does the entire amount need to be done? Thank you.
Thank you. Tom and then Monty. Tom and then Monty.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tom Davis, resident of District 2. To some degree, I actually support the budget, not in its particulars, but the one aspect that I really like to mention, I think is worthy of mention because it's a hard decision, that's to increase taxes, and it's a necessity. The 1% increase in the road levy, and then that money's, my understanding by resolution, would be diverted to the current expense fund, and therefore would be used for operations. Death and taxes are 2 things we can seem to avoid, hopefully not in that order. But the idea is that we have a county that is as it is in terms of its economic drivers by design. It's not a circumstance or happenstance that we got to be here. It's because we choose to be a timber-defined county. 90% of this county is forested. About 336,000 acres are commercial forest. Very little revenue for property tax is generated through forestry. As a matter of fact, I think it's safe to say that when you think about developable land, the least feasible, economically feasible in terms of generating revenue usage you can do with it is grow trees. You could have an open pit mine and actually generate more money than you can with growing trees. That's not to say that where we choose to be in the timber industry is not a very, very important part
of the economic process here, but it is to say that it doesn't have to be on all developable lands, especially those around the corridor. With a little bit better planning, I think we can have the best of both worlds. But if you continue to put large pieces of land into conservancy or support that process, we'll be headed in the wrong direction, because even the timber industry recognizes that growth is inevitable. They would like to control that growth, and they're good business people. They'd like to control that growth in a manner that best benefits them, and that's what business does. But you don't work for the timber industry, you don't work for any private enterprise, you work for us. So we would expect that you would look out for our best interest, even if sometimes it runs smack up against some other interest. We have a right to expect that. And there'll be more about that I'll speak about during the comprehensive plan. The other thing I'd like to talk about is that I was kind of surprised. I didn't get to the meeting on Tuesday, but I did watch it on Mason Web TV. And when the 1% increase in the road fund levy came up, there was a lot of sad faces, like somebody just shot your dog. And I was happy. I'm not happy about taxes. I was happy because you addressed the necessity of doing so. Difficult decision politically, but this is an economic decision. It's not a political decision. And so you did what you needed to do, and I support you in that. I think that's a step in the right direction. We cannot continue to survive without increasing taxes to some extent. I think the biggest argument most people have is how those taxes are going to be used. Yes, we can fine-tune the budget in the expenditure side, but whether you make a budget based on the expenditure side of the ledger or the revenue side of the ledger, the decision has already been made. We don't have enough money to provide the services, even with the cuts. So now we're looking for new sources of revenue. The new sources of revenue that are available are long-term. You actually have to think this out. We are here today because 6 years ago, people, in my opinion, didn't make the right decisions to put us in a better situation here than we are today, and the decisions you make today will affect 6 years from now. But in terms of infusion of quick cash, which is where we are, the only place you have to go is taxes and fees. You don't want to reduce them, you have to increase them. I don't like to say it, but that's the only option that you really have once you reduce the budget or the expenditure side of the budget to its practical level where you can still provide services. Last night, my wife and I went out. We went to Olympia. We went to the Fishtail. We spent $42. We paid 12 cents more to eat there than to eat in here in Mason County, because their sales tax is 0.3% higher than our sales tax. If our sales tax, which is 0.085 in the unincorporated area, if it went to 0.86, we'd have spent 8 cents different to eat there. Sales tax, and I can speak at least fairly confidently, because the sales tax increase, it doesn't inhibit business, but it does generate an awful lot of money, because it's a very, very small amount spread over a large portion of transactions, and it's also a progressive tax. It would seem to me that once we did the 1/10 of 1% sales tax increase for mental health and substance abuse and therapeutic courts, that has probably generated since so we passed that in 2011, at the very end of 2011. I would assume that we've collected somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million since that time, which, or maybe more. But the point is that you would have accumulated that amount of money that you were asking voters to voluntarily tax themselves for, had you, if we could councilmatically, or if not councilmatically, propose a sales tax increase. I don't think it hurts business. I think it's a smart move. I think that we have, for an infusion of quick cash, which is really the only resource we have to go to. But I also like to say one thing, a little bit more on the positive side. The future of Mason County is beginning to change. The EDC is redirected. I think you folks have started to redirect. We're all coming a little bit closer together to where we need to be, because growth is inevitable. Now it's just a matter of who's going to control that growth. And as much as Commissioner Netherland, you and I disagree on some very fundamental things, I go to Belfair. Belfair is alive. Belfair is happening. 6 years ago, Belfair was dead. You'd go through there, you couldn't get through there fast enough. Now all these projects are happening in Belfair. Much more business happening in Belfair in the North County than is happening down here in the South County. This was a long time in coming, but that's to your hard work. And so, like I said, we don't agree on a lot of things, but people should be recognized for their efforts. And I think hooking up to the SKIA, which is not called a SKIA anymore, with the sewer, is a smart business deal if you can cut the right deal. All the hope seems to be for a generation for the future revenues seems to be concentrated more in Belfair. I would like to see this commission get now more behind the Shelton Hills project. Not your project, who cares? We are a municipality. It's not like the city is located in another state. Your verbal support would mean a great deal. That project, which is a game changer for the entire county, not just the city, needs support. And this commission has been virtually silent over the last 8 years while that project is stalled. Get behind that. The PUD and the DOT are the two roadblocks in that right now. And if they had a little bit more support from other municipalities, instead of lawsuits like has happened in the past, we have a developer, we have a plan. I think based on something like close to $80 million that are generated through property taxes, only $5 million is generated through sales and use tax. That's where you want to go. That's where you want to concentrate. It's a 20-year plan, to be sure, but the decisions you make today, so we don't have to sit here year after year and hope that something's going to change. You can change it, or at least start changing it right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Monty Ritter. I'm on the Mason County Parks and Trails Citizens Advisory Board. And I have to agree with Tom Davis there. We do have an opportunity for over a year now. Our Parks Board has been working on trying to update some fees. These are existing fees that we have an ability to, if we have the commissioner's support on this, we could put it in front of the citizens, and if people agree, we have a resolution 65-05, which allows use of Walker Park for boating and overnight camping. And currently we have just reached earlier or at the end of last year an agreement with a kayaking group, a national kayaking group, to put Walker Park as a destination. Something like that's a nice economic incentive for people to come to Mason County. We have Resolution 52-08, which establishes a policy use of Truman Glick Park and Foothills Park sites for special event camping, and authorizing Parks and Trails Department to implement and enforce the terms of such policy. In this, it also says that newer facilities in the future may be allowed to also be used for overnight camping. This is something else we're looking forward to. And we also have a resolution 39-11 for hosting special events at Mason County park sites. These, in according to our resolution 10-09, allows us an opportunity to look into, say, boat launch fees. We also have the ability now, with the wonderful completion of Mason County Recreational Area, having 4 all-weather fields, and Sandhill Park now having a beautiful field up there too. We could even, using previous authorization, reinstitute some programs that allowed us to perhaps put billboards out there. We have a lot of sign spacage, and now that we have opportunities for wonderful events that are guaranteed to be held because they won't be rained out. We can maybe use this for an incentive to get some of our local businesses to support the parks. And the reason we bring this up is because, of course, the park board is concerned, because even though we've been rolled into the support Support Services Department, given the REIT 2 money and all this has kind of disappeared from parks. Our parks have a mandate when we worked with the Recreation and Conservation Office to use some of their funds to create superior facilities. We are obligated to keep these facilities open. And if we do not keep these open, then the county will have to transfer some of these parks to other entities like Fish and Wildlife or something, or if to keep some of these facilities open if we can't. Therefore, I think that it's imperative that if we can put forth a proposal, the County Park Board, if we can put a proposal together beginning this next year after a lot of input from the public, we think that maybe some of these fees can be used to support the Parks Department, keep the lawnmowers running, keep some of the gates open for some of the further out there parks and everything. I know you guys have done a lot of work for us for the last several years. We have a lot of good stuff out there. Sand Hill Park, North Mason, we have the Hood Canal School District, all these things, Coulter Creek, Oakland Bay, all these things have been going on. There's a lot of things we'd like to do, and if I can just say, the only other thing that we have is we have to maintain our good standing with the Recreation and Conservation Office. However, last year they changed their requirements, and whereas our comprehensive plan for the Parks Department should have been good until 2019, in order to be able to be eligible for 14 different RCO grants, we need to actually have our comprehensive plan in front of the board so you can vote on it in February, because this is now due in March, and it's not something we have to do. All municipalities have to take this into consideration. It's not lack of us doing something wrong, but in doing so, with respect, it's hard for us to always have a quorum. And October, Jesse Sims had to resign because he had an overload of work and wasn't able to attend. Mindy Harlow immediately put in her application in October, but we haven't heard back yet as far as why she's not appointed, and we didn't have a quorum last month. In order to get all this stuff done right away, I would ask please if next week you could place her appointment to the park board at top of your business list, and maybe next week on Tuesday we could have her appointed. We don't have a quorum this week, and we can change our park board meeting till next Tuesday on the 12th if we could be sure to have our full contingent of park board members. Once again, thank you for all you've been doing.
Marty? First of all, I just want to, I don't know if you know, but when we received word back after the review of our comp plan updates, specifically the Department of Commerce pulled out and called out the parks plan as being very good. So I just wanted you to know that.
Okay, thank you. And we do need to get that voted on, and
Okay.
I gotta say, Frank's been with us for 3 years, and I know we've had a lot of changes for everything, but I do appreciate all the hard work. Frank has a good open door policy, as all of you do, and it's been really easy. I know without a specific park director, it's been hard because everybody's had to work double time, including your park board. But we all get to enjoy the park, so we like doing it.
But I have a question, and thank you for your service on the Parks Advisory Board. Has the advisory board specifically looked at and studied overnight camping and what that would take and costs involved and revenues vis-a-vis costs and market research or any? Have you looked specifically at overnight camping here in the county?
Well, I have to say we have in the past we had a program, and we even have all the sheet. I think all we need to do now is take this consumer pricing index, add it to something, because we have not updated any of our fees for so many years, from Walker Park, from MCRA to everything. We've kind of, for the last 6 years or so, we have not had any price increases. And so we do think there's a formula for putting this together, but because for most people this is essentially a brand-new fee. We would feel better if we put it together and have something in black and white so we can put it in front of everybody, and then the commissioners can vote on it again as if it was a brand-new fee, instead of just rebooting already approved programs.
Thank you.
I have a question. You had mentioned closing parks. Have we closed any parks?
I do believe that we have one park that we had out there that we think was gonna have to be closed, that was, I wanna,
Nothing, anything out of the norm. We do have some parks that we close in the winter.
Yes, okay.
right, but we can't, but we do have that obligation to keep RCO-funded parks open, and those are the expensive ones, and their superior services, I think, afford us the ability to maybe charge a fee that everybody could be pleased with, just to keep everything, even the floats, or the cleats on the floats. These things get busted, but I mean, if we don't have a few dollars in our reserve fund to maintain these things, then they're closed. That's kind of the same thing. So, hey, thank you.
Thanks, Monty,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Anyone else for public comment?
I have an inquiry. The counter's not on. Is the recorder on?
Yes.
Yes.
All the red buttons.
And my apologies, but I do have to get back over to the courthouse, and Patsy will remain.
Are we positive?
Yeah.
It's just the timer.
Okay. Leslie?
Leslie Peterson, 1380 East Island Lake Drive. Good morning, and I thank you for allowing us to have a time to relay to you my concerns about the county's fiscal health and responsibility as we go into 2018. The citizens have clearly rejected the proposal of any new taxes with our overwhelming rejection of the tax levy lift. But I do understand that we are in a financial deficit, our numerous years of living beyond our means. So what do we do now? From what I understand, the proposed 2018 budget will be significantly reduced from the previous year and will bring a reduction in expenditures from each office. I appreciate hearing a balanced budget proposal and a budget for a 2-year period to give the departments consistency. I understand making deep cuts at one time will expose the county to serious liability issues, which we can't afford, and put a risk to the services to us in the public. After years of irresponsible spending, this budget is a stopgap to help us get back on the firm and healthy financial footing that we as citizens look forward to. I wish we could make the cuts with the stroke of your pen and save our tax dollars, but that is not a responsible way to solve our problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob Drexler, 51 Sinclair Place in Shelton. I've changed my mind listening to folks who have been talking. I've changed my mind of what I was going to say this morning. I was dead against tax increases. I got to say that. That's just how I feel. That's how I look. That's how I think. I think we should live within our means, and I think we don't try hard enough to do that. I think we have, like the lady just said, we've overspent for so many years. We've gold-plated our systems and our programs, and I don't think we need to be that way. So that being said, though, what I'm hearing is I agree, and I'm one that believes in paying for what I use. I don't mind park fees. I don't mind those sorts of things. I think they make sense. I pay for what I get, and don't mind doing that. That being said, so I guess I would now speak in support of the budget as it was. I wish it were less. I wish it were less. One thing about the road tax, though, is that's 1 year, and that's my concern. That's my real concern about this entire budget this year. It is stopgap. If we don't somehow pull together and work this thing out as an entire community, as an entire group, we'll be in the same spot this time next year. And we can't keep doing that. I like the road fund increase, truthfully, because after we blow it this year, I use that term advisedly, after we blow that money this year, at least next year, maybe we can build some roads and some things like that by using that money that will increase that budget by. So, much as I hate to say it, I think I'm in support of your budget. Thank you.
Any other for comment? Going once. Okay, seeing nobody else for public comment at this time, I'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and we will move to commissioner discussion and then a possible motion. Commissioner?
First question, Frank, what was our final 2017 budget after adjusted and compared to this year? This year's proposed budget that's before us?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, I apologize.
Do you know what around the difference between these two?
I have, based on documentation we had given last week,
I know we had the request on here, but I was wondering what the actual...
the second column proposed as of 11/22/17 expenses. Okay, I'm sorry, you're right.
That was the proposed,
I don't know off the top of my head.
are we increasing the amount we're spending this year over last year
As a function of
in the general fund?
expenditures only?
Yeah,
Or
total, yeah.
including
No,
any fund balance?
expenditures only, what are we saying?
Yes.
So we are spending more than we did last year. Okay. Bank capacity. I'll give you my opinion. Well, actually, I'm gonna take Tom's first, and then I'll come back to that. A little clarification, Tom. It's not a 1% increase. I know that's what it said because when they read it, they read the short form of it instead of the full thing that we had. That said 1% and banked excess capacity to set a levy at. Problem is, banked excess capacity was 8.79%. So you're looking at a total increase of 9.79% or 10% on the people. And on the road fund of all things, which is going to help us this year to be able to spend more money than we did last year. But it's not going to help us in the general fund. So we're going to spend more money and we're going to be in worse shape. And again, in my opinion, we did it after the people told us not to. If we'd have done it beforehand, that would have been different. But they told us not to. We asked for their opinion, went out. So, I want to thank you for the comments on Belfair. You're right. And there's another half a dozen things that are coming that nobody knows yet. But there's more. But I'm pretty positive everybody on this commission is completely supportive of Shelton Hills and would do anything we can if they ask for anything from us to help make it happen. If it's within our ability, I think we all are supportive of that because we see it as rising tide floats all boats. The bank capacity. What that is this capacity that we did not take over the past years in the road fund. And yes, we could take 1%, we could take 2%. There was a decision to take all of it, and that's what I disagreed with and still do. As for the park fees and stuff like that, it is something we have to look at. There's no way around that, and we're going to be looking at that. And I think that still sits within the parameters of what we've talked to with the public. It is our job, and we will look at that, and I think we'll make some good decisions. But we have to make sure, as Commissioner Jeffries had pointed out, it sounds good on one end, on the revenue end, but then you have to look at what it actually costs to maintain that and pay for people to be there specifically for that purpose, and the damages that occur and stuff with that. So it isn't going to be just as easy as saying we're just going to let people camp on all of our parks, because financially it may not be beneficial, and even then to degrade a certain park down to a level in order to make an extra $500 may not be wise in the long run. So we need to look at each one individually. I myself, again, I did a lot of hard work, and I came up with a lot of recommendations on what I thought we could afford, and I still am standing with that. There are those departments that can't handle any cut at all. They just can't, and we have to go through each budget and decide which ones we think we can, which ones we think we can't. I asked when we were working on this that we remember the adage, take only what you need, not all you can get. I have a feeling, my personal belief is that when we looked at that bank capacity, we took all we can get instead of taking just what we needed. There should have been a big difference, and I don't think that should have occurred. So most likely, depending on what comes out of this, I doubt I will be voting for this budget, and I've never had that issue before. But I just can't see how I can.
Thank you.
Commissioner Edlin, thank you. I would like to ask specifically, I'm looking through my notes from our discussions about a potential levy shift. And I have, I think, $655,000 is what you had agreed you'd be willing to shift.
I think it was 400,000 for the levy shift without the tax increase. I could see us taking a 1% of it maybe to help offset that so that the amount, but that was without also the diversion and everything else.
It would be helpful to me if you could re-review what you were recommending as far as,
Well, no, I remember, I can put it out for you if you want me to.
well, tell me what it was then,
Okay.
please. As far as a levy shift, were you supportive of a levy shift, and how much?
I was supportive of a levy shift.
Okay.
I can see us doing up to $400,000 if there was no tax increase on it, and no diversion, no increase in the diversion. I think that the road fund could have handled that difference. If we'd have given them maybe 1% of the bank capacity, that would have made it a lot easier, and that would also put us in a situation where we'd be in a lot better shape next year.
So you're supportive of taking 1% of the bank capacity in roads, and then diverting, or no diversion, no increased diversion. You recommend the 1.5 that we currently have budgeted,
Yes.
and then doing a levy shift of 400,000 for our ending fund balance.
Yes.
Or for our reserve.
Yes, and there was one other thing that would need to occur, is we would have to increase our revenue by 200,000 in the unexpended budget authority, which, in the discussions I've had, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't think that it'll be less than 600,000, and we're budgeting for zero.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other?
And then you had recommended some additional funds than what we're hearing on today, to other departments, and that source was to have been the additional revenue of the, so we had already distributed out potentially additional 200 for timber tax, 200 for,
No, we hadn't. Do you mean before?
not in this budget we're reviewing today, but
Okay, yeah, in this budget we're reviewing today, that they did increase all that. Before that, we also had to come up with $725,000 to bring it back to the original number for all the departments, and that didn't include the timber. But it was 200 for timber, 200 for DNR, and 200 for
unexpended.
and 45 on what was left of the sales tax increase that they felt comfortable with putting in, that we didn't request, that they felt comfortable putting it forward.
Okay.
And the increases are not above these numbers here. The increases that I recommended is different than what we have on here, because some of them, if you remember after the end, in my opinion, when it was decided that there was going to be money brought in because of raising the bank capacity and the tax in the road fund, then money started going out that was way above my recommendations. I went through the departments that I could and tried to find what I thought was absolutely necessary for them to function without collapsing. And at the end, when there was more money available, there was 65,000 thrown to one department, another 100,000 thrown to a different department, and I don't think it was even built on a rhyme and reason as much as it was trying to help everybody, which I understand that. But when we're at a point, in my opinion, where it is survival and just making sure everybody can survive while we make the cuts, so we don't have this big a bow wave, and we still have some of our opportunities next year to overcome the $700,000 to $750,000 bow wave that we're going to be facing, and try not to lay people off. That was why I made my recommendations.
Thank you. So I'm also a little bit nervous about taking the entire bank capacity. I agree that we should take some bank capacity of the road fund, and once we get the information solidified regarding whether or not a levy shift would have a negative impact on the city's Metropolitan Park District, have that shifted over. If that's not possible, I don't see where that would be something I could support. The total amount of 841 does cause me pause. But there are certain very essential functions. I agree with what our district court judge has said that needs to be supported, as well as our Office of Public Defense and our prosecutor. And so I think it's a function of getting back the information from the city about whether they had raised their Metropolitan Park District levy, whether they recertified. And that was to be happening today, potentially. Okay. I don't think we're ready to adopt a budget today. I do support the stopgap for an effort to go back to the voters with a more refined question and request. What I had heard about the resounding no was that people wanted more certainty about where that money was going to go. A levy lid lift would obviously be more flexible for us as a county government, but I think that the support that of our criminal justice system must be I think it's pretty paramount in a lot of our citizens' minds. And so if there was an additional tax proposal presented to the voters that identified criminal justice and public safety as the support for those monies, I would like to help put that on the ballot and put the education out to the community about how that would be funded. But I do need to make it clear that I would use that money as a supplantation of what currently goes into current expense for public safety and criminal justice to then support the other functions of the county government, our parks, our assessor, our auditor, our treasurer, our facilities. So it wouldn't be, and I could support putting on the ballot and doing a good public education campaign around a new tax levy, specifically for criminal justice, but not to increase criminal justice, but to backfill the losses to the other departments that don't get the kind of natural support from the community, but are essential to Mason County and to county government. So I would support an additional $500,000 diversion over traffic diversion to help the sheriff's office offset some of the proposed cuts there, and then the amount of bank capacity of the roads to be diverted over to a levy shift. I think we still need some more discussion about that, so I would not be ready to adopt a budget today, given that the outstanding discussions we still need to have.
Very good. So a few remarks. I would concur. The budget in front of everybody today is not a final budget. It's close, but it's not there. So still a lot of work to do, and I think this is my first year in office, and I've heard a lot this year about how this reminds staff who's been here much, much longer than I have, this reminds them of years past where the commission has been here on December 31st trying to adopt a budget. It's my opinion that there's no reason that we shouldn't pass this budget before the 31st and before the Christmas break. I think we have a lot of the pieces put together. I would also say that politics is a very interesting kind of process. When I came into office a year ago, or just about a year ago, and prior to that when I was running for office, I talked a lot about how important it was to make sure that we were adequately funding our criminal justice system. It's unfortunate that when there are campaigns and there are conversations about achievements and things like that, that it's okay to talk about increasing a budget and then coming in the following year and gutting a budget. That's politics. It's very frustrating to go through that process and to know that people may have expected one thing and have ended up closer to getting another. in that regard. And coming into office, there was a budget passed last year that I inherited. That in March left us with $170,000 cash on hand. It was a budget that was adopted that led us to have to consider some very difficult mid-year reductions, which was difficult for all of the offices, in particular the ones that had to bear the full brunt, but even for the ones that had a limited cut to make, it was difficult for them as well. It was difficult to have to sit down and say, well, let's go to the voters and ask for more without having a clear plan on how to spend that money. It's difficult to sit in budget briefings and hear a list of needs and see that list put up against our list of resources and not have those come close to each other. And frankly, coming into office this year, it has been a very difficult process to get people to understand that we need to change the way we do business in Mason County government. What we've experienced isn't acceptable not just to me, but to the people of Mason County. I think they're the ones that suffer in all this. We'll get to come back to work in January once the budget is passed. All the other electeds will get to come back in January once the budget is passed. We have to take an assessment of where that budget leaves the county. And I think that some of the ideas that I've brought forward this year have been supported, and I appreciate the support for things like a 2-year budget, because we would be talking about that $750,000 bow wave now, not waiting until next December to talk about that bow wave. I appreciate the support for a balanced budget resolution, because for too long we relied on reserve dollars. We counted on those dollars to balance budgets in the past. To our detriment, it was a way to put off having difficult conversations like the ones that we're having now and like the ones that we're going to be having all of next year. I appreciate the support that I've received for the idea of bringing a citizen-led budget sustainability committee into formation so that we can bring the public into the process even further, so that folks in the community who are paying the bill understand how the money is generated to pay that bill, and that they understand as well what limited resources the counties and local governments in Washington have in order to generate revenue needed to provide essential and mandated services that are many times handed down to us from the state of Washington, from the legislature, without the support to fund them. We need to have a more thorough vetting of what our priorities are, and I think that citizen-led budget committee will help us move in that direction. And if that committee finds that there are recommendations that they'd like to bring forward on other revenue, I, for one, would be very interested in hearing those recommendations. But as we stand today, this is a budget that can't be adopted because it's not finished. And so we have a couple of weeks left in front of us in which we have to get to work. That work is only completed by the elected and department heads coming together as we have. I particularly applaud Commissioner Drexler for being able to sit down with the Sheriff's Office. I know that has long been a contentious relationship amongst the County Commission and that office, and I applaud her for her efforts to come to the table with them and hear some of their thoughts. It's difficult to make any kind of decisions on what is the largest budget in the county government without being able to sit down and have a conversation, and so I applaud her efforts in that regard. So I'll leave you with this. We have a lot of work to do, but we have enough time to do it. We have enough capacity to do it. Our staff has worked very hard, as staff across the county has continued to work very hard. But I don't think I will be able to sit up here and accept the notion that in one budget we can say it's time to live within our means after years of not, and saying that that's an okay way to run the government. I don't think that we can gut the budget in 1 year I don't think offices have fully grasped what the mid-year cuts have meant for their offices long-term. We're going to see significant reductions again in this budget over the budget that was adopted almost 1 year ago today for 2017 that led us to have to make those decisions in July. And so for whatever conversations there are, 2018 is a get-right year for Mason County, and I intend to continue working on that process. With that, I would entertain a motion.
I still have something I'd like to say.
Please.
A few clarifications for everybody, Commissioner. First of all, it was made clear this is not a reduction in spending. This is an increase in spending at this point. Hopefully that changes. I hope we come back with one that is a decrease in it. In Commissioner Jeffrey's comments or worries about buying down from the city, there's a good reason to be worried about that. Because when you buy anything down, you're basically paying to use that money. So there's a greater cost for it. It's not just a local thing there. If you have to pay the city $75,000 or $100,000 in order to use that capacity, then you've just paid to switch that money over, and that makes that money a lot more expensive. This last year, again, when you budget, you don't budget into your reserve. That's the whole reason for having a reserve, but we budgeted to our reserve. One of the problems we faced this year was something that we didn't know, is we had a great recession when it comes to how much revenue came in compared to what had normally come in. And during the year, we had to adjust for that. It is my hope that we will have more revenue this next year, but we don't know that yet. And so when we make our decisions, I hope we base it upon being more realistic with our chances right now, making sure that anything that we get extra will build that capacity up so we can try to maintain things in a better manner than we're going to have to this year. But I do hope we do come back at least with a budget that's the same or less than what we had the year before.
Mr. Chair, I feel like the public, because we're not done, I'm not willing to close public hearing, but unfortunately, because of state law, we can only continue the hearing on a 5-day basis or something like that, for 5 days. Though we may not be ready for a final budget to vote on December 5th, I would move to continue the public hearing to December 5th at 9:30 a.m.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to continue the public hearing to Tuesday, December 5th at 9:30 a.m. Any additional discussion?
Just that we think that we probably won't be ready for a final budget for adoption until December 19th. So the continuation is follow state law and to give another opportunity for public input as we progress in our budget work.
Okay, question for staff on that. Does that change anything in terms of the potential adoption date of the 19th?
No.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, any additional discussion?
Is that 5 working days?
It says 5 days. You can interpret it how.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any
It's
additional?
generally 5 days, consecutive days.
Okay, so, okay, I understand. Thank you. Okay, any additional discussion?
No, and again, this is simply so that we're not closing down the public, an opportunity for public to weigh in. I don't anticipate tomorrow to have anything else, save something else happening today, but if folks want to come tomorrow night, wait a sec, that's at
It's the
9:30?
9th, yeah,
Okay,
the morning meeting.
thank you.
And we will be opening it back up for public comment, right?
Yes.
Okay, hearing no additional discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Moves us to item number 5. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.